I'm Victoria Hart. The library reached out to me to ask me to design a piece for the wall. They wanted a history timeline of the West Las Vegas history. And usually as a designer, I start backwards. First they said, hey, we just want this really beautiful mural to go up the stairs. And I was like, this is a really large $40 million building. Let's do more than just a mural. And so you guys got to see it from downstairs. And if you look through the window here, you can see it really well too. But it's three-dimensional and it's got the backlighting on it. It's really beautiful and all the photos pop off. And so they just wanted a piece that was really, really going to be a love letter to the West Las Vegas community. And there are a few wonderful timelines in the West Las Vegas area already. So I was able to, so again, I'm sorry, starting backwards, I kind of looked for a printer and a fabricator that could actually produce something that large to go up the stairs. So I reached out to a local printer called Color Reflections, and they've been here for many, many years, and they helped me with the backlighting and all the technical stuff. So once I had that in order, then I started working on the content and the copy and the photos. And that's where Tyler comes in. Tyler is a professor at UNLV, and I was able to pull all the history that I could find that was out there already. And I said, here, Tyler, help me fill in the gaps because you're the expert. And just a little bit of gaps here and there. Because if you look around the city of Las Vegas has a great timeline on their website. And there's a few other, there's a park right across the street that has a really wonderful timeline. And it actually showcases a lot of people that aren't even on this timeline that have been instrumental in the West Las Vegas area. So lots of content, and Tyler was able to help me with that. And then we sourced the photos. I ended up going through the Nevada, the UNLV archives. They have a wonderful archive, and then the Las Vegas LVCVA archives. They have an amazing archive of a lot of vintage photos. And when they first asked me to do it, they said, hey, we want this West Las Vegas timeline. And I said, it would be really fun if we included this global timeline too, so people that are history buffs can kind of compare what was happening in the world with what was happening in West Las Vegas. So on the global timeline, I tried to pull elements from art and theater and politics and sports and kind of get a really beautifully well-rounded look at what was happening in the world. So some of my favorites are Disneyland opened at the same year that the Moulin Rouge opened. And I love the Moulin Rouge. This is one of my favorites. Actually, I designed the logo for the city of Las Vegas. It's on that big arch that you see at the Stratosphere. Yeah. So that influence came from this Moulin Rouge sign. Oh, cool. It's the type of treatment I just love so much. So that was a big influence on that. But so that's my process. I would then find all the photos that went with the history of the timeline, and then we went through a million edits back and forth on the copy because this is the library, and there can be no typos and no errors, and so Tyler, I'll give some time to Tyler and let him talk a little bit about how he kind of filled in the gaps for us too, because you guys are history buffs, so I'm assuming you want to know more about that.
Yeah, feel free to ask.
You are.
Yes, you are. So my background is I'm the chair of the Interdisciplinary Gender and Ethnic Studies Department, specifically hired for my expertise in African American and African diaspora history. So the other thing to know about me is that I'm born and raised in Las Vegas. So I was born here in the 1980s, came of age, public schooling throughout the system, got my degree from UNLV. So uniquely enough, though, is that when I was raised in Las Vegas, I didn't know any of this history that we're seeing here. It was really not something that was emphasized. And so when I moved back to Las Vegas about 7 years ago, I started becoming more curious about local history and the ways under which one could uncover that. So when Victoria had reached out about designing a timeline for the new West Las Vegas Library, I was very excited to contribute in the way that I could. But then I realized how daunting of a task it would be, because I had been collecting research about Black Las Vegas for a number of years at that point. And as you can probably see with kind of maybe a condensed framework, you all support museums, so I think you understand this dilemma. is what do you choose to include within this broader narrative? And so we're talking about one of the most dynamic cities in the world, but equally dynamic is what the contributions of its Black population have made to the city. So what I had determined to do when I was thinking of what this timeline would look like, I think we were limited to 40 particular sections. So obviously we start out with J.T. McWilliams Town Site, which is west of the railroad tracks, and that becomes where Black people would be forced to move, largely because downtown was east of the tracks, and Las Vegas, by the late 20s and early 1930s, had committed itself to being a segregated place. So how do you tell that particular narrative that is one that is going to be empowering for young people that are going to visit this library? Because one thing that I try to stray away from doing as a professor is only giving information that is going to lead students to a certain moment of despair, which I have had happen in my classes. So I want to make sure that we're being honest about what Las Vegas was in this particular era, but the ways under which people reacted to that and the ways they resisted this encroachment upon themselves. So the timeline basically follows the way under which Las Vegas is developing as a segregated city, but also as Black people are moving into the city, what do they do to form community? And what does the West Side mean in the context of the 1930s and 1940s? And when you actually interview people who talked about being raised here as children in the 40s and 50s, they remember their church homes, they remember their neighborhoods, they remember all of these kind of nice things about the way the community had formed despite the circumstances. So we wanted to include those stories. We include the trailblazers, like Woodrow Wilson, pictured here, who becomes the first Black assembly person within the state's history. Herman Moody, who becomes the first Black police officer, moves here at 16 years old, kind of works his way up. But also we include people who are not technically from Las Vegas, but made significant contributions to advancing civil rights. A person like Josephine Baker, who in the context of the 50s was the most famous woman in the world, arguably. I often tell my students that you have kind of Beyonce. Josephine Baker was Beyonce and perhaps more in the 1950s. She helped with the French Resistance during World War II. Very famous person. So when she comes to Las Vegas, it's one of my favorite stories, which is why I felt like it had to be included. And I didn't see it on any other timelines. So she comes to Las Vegas to perform in the 1950s. At this point, she's at the height of her career. She does 2 shows at what I believe is called the Last Frontier, the Last Frontier Hotel. And in her contract at this time, African Americans were not allowed to stay at the places at which they performed. African Americans could not attend shows on the Strip or within downtown properties. But within her contract, she has a stipulation that the institution, Last Frontier, must allow Black patronage on at least 2 of the nights that she is going to perform. And on the second night, when they try to go against that particular agreement, as the story goes, she sits down on the stage and basically refuses to perform until her demands are met. And so, responding to that, the management of Last Frontier quickly acquires people of African descent to sit within the performance. And so, even though this doesn't change segregation overnight, it kind of releases a crack. It starts to poke a hole in the logic of segregation. And because of, Josephine Baker didn't have to do this, but it shows that her commitment to the community was important. And perhaps without that, segregation wouldn't have happened as quickly as it did. Obviously, the Moulin Rouge is kind of the front and center story of the first kind of integrated hotel and casino. And oftentimes it's said that it's the first integrated hotel casino in Las Vegas, but I would say you could argue it's the first one in the country because gambling was only legal here. So it does kind of hold that title as kind of an American story and institution. And then we get into eventually 1959 with Charles Keller. Then by the 1960s, Las Vegas becomes desegregated. And so the rest of the timeline follows some of these compelling stories. Dr. King visits in 64 as he's seeking votes and lobbying for the civil rights legislation. He views Las Vegas as an important part of that particular story. Doolittle Center opens in 65. West Las Vegas Library through activist efforts of Ruby Duncan in 1973, and then the second one opens 16 years later. So basically, we have both institutional stories, personal stories, celebrity stories, people who are quote-unquote normal stories. Like, it represents the broad swath of what West Las Vegas is, but also really how we should be thankful for those who lived in West Las Vegas, because my argument is that it was that community pushing for civil rights that made the city a better version of itself. So that's what I hope people gather from this timeline, that there should be a sense of pride when you view the history of this community. Even if you're not from this community, it still means something to you. So.
Thank you, Tyler. That's great.
Sorry, I was professor mode for a little bit. Thank you for listening. I appreciate that.
That's very good. Does anybody have any questions?
That picture down there, where is that taken?
That is at the park right across the street. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
That is really
That's
nice.
brand new. That is President Obama.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Legacy Park.
Legacy Park? Okay, I gotta go check that out.
Why'd you pick the one with the wet willy?
It looks like he's sticking his finger in his ear, huh? Yep. I just love the barbershop scene. I think it is so reminiscent of just
It is.
the real Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
And so we tried to get a mix of like, you know, just people that were lived here as well as like really people that really changed the whole
Sorry
environment.
about that.
You were good.
They didn't want to go away.